you put them down. What about suicide? For someone who thinks in an evolutionary framework, there can be nothing more than pain and pleasure. And if your life consists of more pain than pleasure, and it looks like it's not going to improve, the logical thing to do is to commit suicide. What about murder? Some of you will remember Jeffrey Dahmer, a notorious American serial killer, necrophiliac, and cannibal, who murdered 17 men and boys, and ate some of them, between 1978 and 1991. This is what Dahmer said. If a person doesn't think there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. I always believed the theory of evolution is truth, that we all just came from the slime. When we died, you know, that was it. There is nothing. Apparently, Jeffrey Dahmer converted to Christianity before he died, or was put to death. Drug abuse follows in evolutionary societies. Why not? There is no God. Nudity. As this society becomes more secular, nudity will increase. Because, for instance, animals go naked. And it's the Bible, you know, which teaches that clothing is given by God to cover man's nakedness. Most of the current moral debates in our society must be viewed in the light of evolutionism. Animal welfare. Think about that for a moment from an evolutionary standpoint. Human population control. And even religion. Religion must be viewed as everything must be viewed according to the passionate evolutionist. Religion must be viewed as an evolutionary phenomena. The Bible teaches, on the other hand, that there is one true God, and that people fall away from the truth of God in their generations into idolatry. That's the Christian view. Evolutionism sees progress in religion too, development. It starts off with animism, believing that some sort of mystical, divine presence pervades the things in the world around us. From that comes polytheism as people become more sophisticated. That is, there are many gods. And then henotheism, that there's one God above the other gods. And from that comes monotheism. And that in turn leads to atheism. When once mankind evolves to the point that he understands evolutionism and he realizes that religion is complete nonsense. Evolutionism has led to the radical reinterpretation of the Old Testament. Evolutionism is not just an attack on the opening chapters of Genesis, and indeed the many other parts in the Bible that teach about creation and related themes, but evolutionism is an attack on the whole history of Old Testament religion and on Israel's religion in particular. Higher criticism of the Bible in the 19th and 20th centuries was itself fueled and driven by evolutionary ideas. And then there's the whole notion of truth itself. Evolutionism denies absolute truth. If you're an evolutionist, then truth is just a chemical reaction in the brain. There is no truth or falsity with the pinging of electrons underneath your cranium. Just reactions. Which brings us to the whole subject of education. Evolutionism, as we've seen, affects various fields of study. More than that, It affects the very idea of truth itself. And then, on top of those two things, evolutionism affects education itself. It affects the theory of education because the theory of education includes a viewpoint of the teacher and the taught. Who is the teacher? He's an evolved monkey. Who are the taught? They are evolved slime. Along with that comes a whole worldview of evolution, whether it's presented consciously or unconsciously. For my own part, being trained in the state school system, the unspoken, unarticulated message which sank into me day after day was, God is unnecessary and irrelevant. You can be a well-developed human being, knowledgeable about all sorts of areas, without knowing anything about God. He's an unnecessary hypothesis. Some of you may have read the Humanist Manifesto number 1 of 1933. Humanist Manifesto, designed to promote secularism. What does Article 1 deal with? This. It states, though not in these words, the universe is not created. That's its starting point. Article 2 affirms biological evolutionism. The Humanist Manifesto. And the next 13 articles flow from these two foundational principles. The Humanist Manifesto number 1 of 1933, number 2 of 1973, and a Secular Humanist Declaration of 1980 require that education be entirely in the light of evolutionism in order to promote humanism. That is what has been happening in Western society, in North America, in Europe, around the world, for the last several decades. Decade by decade, year by year, it becomes more and more humanistic because this is the philosophy which the leaders have and they desire to work it through. What I'm saying in short is that evolutionism is a worldview. I've mentioned some of the spheres it most obviously affects: biology, history, and so on. I could add to that law, punishment, politics, comparative anatomy, meteorology, the weather, climatology. It creates its own ethics. It promotes itself by education, especially of the young. It is a worldview. As a worldview, it attempts to explain everything